Okay, so hello everyone. For this discussion video, we have to consider the topic on your hydrologic cycle or hydrological cycle, more commonly known as the water cycle. If you would notice, sa ating module, we need to discuss the concept of hydrologic cycle, especially if we will have to talk about environmental chemistry. So even in our elementary or primary years, we have already discussed the concept of water cycle. And when we talk about your hydrologic or water cycle, this describes the pilgrimage of water as water molecules and their way of transfer from the Earth's surface to the atmosphere and back again. If we have to recall the concept of your water cycle, it is a way of describing the material flow of water throughout the earth. And as much as we could recall the concept of water cycle discussed to us during our elementary years, we are concerned with the topics, three major processes happening in our water cycle, and that is the topics or that is the process of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. And for this discussion video, we still have to consider that process. But as you could see in this representation here, in this picture here, the water cycle doesn't only involve such processes, but a lot more processes happening in the concept of your water cycle. And if we have to consider the concept of water cycle, we have to consider two primary components. Number one is you have to consider the component storage. Another one is movement. And when we have to discuss the storage, it is we are referring to the system where the water resides. And um, it is a specific system where the water reside or rest as it moves from one reservoir to another. So, for example, it could be possible that if water enters a lake through some movement, such as precipitation, and it could be it could undergo another process involved in our water cycles. And it is also important to note that in order for us to have movement in this type of cycle, in this hydrologic cycle, we need to require energy in order for water to change state, either from solid to liquid or any other form of transformation. And since considering that nature allows the law of conservation of energy, the energy to fuel the cycle we have to consider in your hydrologic and water cycle must come from somewhere. And when we talk about this source of fuel or this source of energy in your hydrologic cycle or in our water cycle, this energy comes from the sun. So when we consider your hydrologic cycle, we are considering the series of conditions through which water changes from vapor through or undergoing different types of processes in order for us to perform certain cycles happening all throughout the earth. So what we are aware that water occurs on the earth in different states. So water could exist in its liquid form, water could also exist in solid form and gaseous form. And in order for us to perform or to understand the concept of water cycle, we have to also consider that we have certain movement going in here. And when we talk about your primary or elementary years of understanding the water cycle, we are considering three major processes. Again, that is your evaporation, condensation, and at the same time your precipitation. But in this entire concept of your water cycle, let me just add and clarify more of the processes happening in this concept. And one of those is your condensation. We have also your precipitation happening in here. We have also your infiltration happening. We have your runoff happening through the entire process, and we have your evapotranspiration happening. Take note that these processes I mentioned here is happening simultaneously except for the one, and that is for precipitation. So together, these five processes that we mentioned is what made up the complete concept of your hydrologic cycle. So very simple concept of understanding sa aton nga water cycle will be discussed. So, and when we mention about your movement nga kinahanglan i-consider in the concept of your water cycle or hydrologic cycle, that is considering all the dynamic aspects of the movement of water. And this includes number one, so there is a movement when there is evaporation. Evaporation of water from water bodies such as ocean and lakes. There is also movement happening when we have formation and movement of clouds. There is also movement happening when we will be considering rain, snowfalls, and stream flow, and even through the movement of the groundwater as it moves through the oceans or rivers. So that is the dynamic part of your water cycle, and that is referring to the movement. If we go back to the concept discussed in our high school or elementary years, we talk about evaporation. We also consider the concept of condensation. So let us just recall the concept of condensation discussed during that year when um, and let us understand what is really happening with the concept of condensation. When in fact, condensation is the process of water changing from vapor to liquid. That is the key concept in here. Condensation is changing of your water vapor to liquid. But paano na siya nagkakatabo? Ano ang natabo or paano na siya nagkakatabo ang changing of water vapor into liquid? So, take note that water vapor in the air mostly rises through the process na ginatawag natin nga convection. This means that warm, humid air will rise while ang aton nga cooler nga air will flow downward. Samtang aton nga warmer air nag-rise, ang aton water vapor will also lose its energy, causing aton nga temperature to drop. Then, because of that, the water vapor has to change into, from that state, nga vapor siya, into its liquid or ice nga state. So, generally, kung mag-mention kita about water vapor, it is just considering that your warm air rises and your air condenses into the form of clouds. So, that is your concept of condensation. Paano siya hindi pa po namon sir ma-visualize kung anong kakatabo. So let me just give you a very simple example kung anong kakatabo with the condensation na process. You can see condensation in the action whenever you, for example, may ara ka mo, nagkuha ka sang cold soda from the ref or refrigerator. Butang mo siya in a room, and then notice nga outside sa aton nga can of soda may makita kada nga water droplets or specific na water molecules nga present dira. So the water, consider nga that water wala na siya naghalin sa sulod sa aton nga soda can, but what happens is that it comes from the water vapor nga ara sa palibot sa aton nga soda can. So as the air cools around sa aton nga soda can, the water droplets form outside sa aton nga soda can. And that is the entire concept of condensation because of the change in temperature happening in there. So may na-form kita nga water droplets. Okay, so if we will have to look at the concept sa diri sa aton nga water cycle nga drawing, we are aware that ang pinakadako nga part of water present sa aton nga earth is in the oceans, sa dragid nga part. So what a convenient starting point would it be kung dira kita masugod describe sang cycle of your hydrologic cycle. Water in the oceans evaporates due to the heat energy provided by the solar radiation. So, as what I am mentioning kagina, ang main diri nga factor nga naga-fuel sa aton nga hydrologic cycle is the presence of the sun. So because of your evaporation, so because of the evaporation nga nagakatabo, so the water vapor moves upward and diri na dayon nga aton ma-form ang clouds. And um, while much of the clouds condense, kag pwede sila madagdag liwat into the ocean or sa mga bodies of water. Take note also that there is a possibility that your clouds or part of the clouds is driven into your land areas because of wind. Pwede nga mapalid ang ato nga mga clouds pakadto sa ato nga land area. So didto or paglambot nila dari sa mga part of the earth, they will be experiencing sa ginatawag naton nga condensation. So take note, bisan dahil siya matabo and the ocean nga part, it will be experiencing the process of condensation nga gin-discuss natin kay gina. So, and then they will go back to the earth through the process of precipitation. And precipitation go back to the land mass in the form of, number one, it could go back in the form of rain. It could also go back in the form of snow, hail, or sleet and etc. And also, in the process of precipitation, take note that it may, bisan in the process nga undergo ka pa precipitation, pwede nga ma-evaporation naman nga katabo. Pwede nga simultaneously you have precipitation and evaporation happening. So, ang iban wala nagalambot diretso sa ground kay because of the temperature gabalik siya diretso sa babaw. So that is also possible nga pwede na siya matabo. Okay, in the process of precipitation, so a portion of that specific amount of water nga gabalik sa ating ground may be intercepted by the vegetation. So, pwede nga ma-intercept siya sa mga tanom or even mga structures that nga pwede nga it will be evaporated back to the atmosphere or pwede nga magpanaog siya sa aton nga. So, pwede nga ma-intercept siya sa mga tanom and then gamiton na siya nila and then it will go back to the atmosphere. Or pwede man nga manaog na ang ina nga moisture, ang ina nga water content into the ground. So, pwede nga manaog siya diretso sa aton nga ground surface. So, a portion of water that reaches the ground enters the sa aton nga ground surface in any possible outlet nga pwede maagyan sa aton nga tubig. So, pwede nga diri siya maagi sa sining outlet or pwede nga gamiton siya sa plants and then it will go back sa babaw or pwede nga madiretso siya sa lowest nga portion wherein it will go back sa aton nga ocean. So, damo asang posible nga matabo diri. So, the precipitation that reaches sa aton nga surface of the earth pero wala siya ga-infiltrate sa aton nga soil, ginatawag na siya naton nga runoff. And that is one of the process nga gina-consider naton and the concept of your hydrologic cycle. So, your runoff, it can also come from your dere, kung makita ninyo, snow melt. Kung mag-melt ang snow, it could also produce ang tinatawag natin nga runoff. It could also contribute to the process of hydrologic cycle referred to as our runoff. Okay, so when there is a lot of precipitation, so kung damo-damo na sang tubig sa specific nga area, ang aton nga duta becomes saturated with water. So, that means nga ang additional nga rainfall can no longer hindi na pwede makasulod. So, runoff will eventually drain into pakadto sa aton nga creeks, pakadto sa aton mga streams, rivers, and adding a large amount of water nga mag-flow na siya. So, and we are aware nga gakatabo na siya because kung hambalaton amo na gani ang rason nga may move na water sa rivers, creeks, and pakadto sa aton nga oceans. because we are considering the lowest point possible nga pwede makaduan sa aton tubig nga gina-consider is the oceans. Okay, so kung ang hambal natin kagina, if it enters na sa mga channel ngari, so nga pwede nila maagyan sa aton nga water, nagakatabo ang ginatawag natin nga stream flow. So, another concept discussed or another term na gin-mention ko kagina is the concept referred to as your evapotranspiration. So, this one. So, it comes from duwa ka word, and that is your evaporation and at the same time transpiration. So evapotranspiration is the water evaporating from the ground and your transpiration that is happening through the help sa aton nga mga tanom or sa mga plants. Evapotranspiration is also the way wherein water vapor re-enters the atmosphere. So when we talk about evaporation, we are considering that when sun or your radiant energy from the sun hits water, it causes the water or the water molecules to become so active that some of them rises into the atmosphere in the form of vapor. And when we consider the concept of transpiration, again, this is through the plants. It occurs kung ang aton nga mga plants take in water through the roots and release it through sa iyang leaves. Then, a process that can clean water by removing contaminants and pollution is happening. So, ginabalik siya sa plants pakadto sa aton nga atmosphere. Halin sa iyang absorb gamit ang iyang mga roots. And that is the process referred to as transpiration. And take note, gintingob ta na sila duwa. Evaporation and transpiration or your evapotranspiration. Okay, so kung makita ninyo, pwede siya natin i-simplify. And the sequence of events is just a simplistic na picture of a very complex na cycle that has been taking place even pa siguro sa formation of the earth. So, it is seen that your hydrologic cycle is very vast and complicated. So, in which damo-damo kasang posible nga path damo sang araw dari nga pwede naton i-consider kung diin possibly nagakadto ang aton nga tubig nga gina-consider for the entire nga hydrologic na cycle. And take note nga damo man sang possibility kung paano ni siya gaka-complete ang specific na cycle. Because pwede nga dugay-dugay siya nagstay in a specific nga reservoir before siya mag-perform another nga process. So, when we talk about the path of your hydrological cycle or your hydrologic cycle, take note that each path of your hydrologic cycle involves one or more of the following consideration. Number one, kung sa kada path or sa kada alagyan sa aton nga water cycle, we have to consider miara di katabo transportation of water. Another one, second one is there is also the temporary storage nga present in that specific na stage and your change of state. So either of this is happening in the specific stage of your hydrologic cycle. So for example, rainfall ato na i-consider. In the process of rainfall, anong present dara? There is presence of change of state para makaproduce ka rainfall and at the same time transportation. So may movement may transport of water nga natabo in the process of rainfall. Okay, so for example, in the groundwater, dari nga part sa aton nga water cycle, ano ang pwede natin mo-consider dara? Siyempre, groundwater. There is a presence of storage. And another one, may transport man di siya nga nagakatabo. There is transport of water happening in here. Okay, so since na-discuss ko ang concept of storage, let us elaborate more on this topic. When we talk about the storage of water in the concept of your hydrologic cycle, it is vastly important to consider, especially if amo na yung ating mga topic. So, water can be stored in three main places. Number one, pwede natin ma-store ang tubig in the atmosphere. Pwede natin ma-store ang tubig in the earth, surface of the earth. And we have also, pwede natin ma-store ang tubig in the underground nga areas. So, specifically, this water storage uh, are known to be the reservoir naton, including dali ang gina-consider naton yung mga oceans, your glaciers, or your groundwaters, your lakes, mga fresh water ng mga reservoir. So, they are included to be part of your storage na consideration. And ang tanan-tanan ni, collectively, tanan-tanan ng mga water storage areas, it make up sa ginatawag natin nga hydrosphere. So, most water on Earth, syempre, we are aware of that. Pinakadako natin na storage is the oceans. So, uh, that is approximately considering 97% so of the entire water so is present in the oceans. Okay, so because the overwhelming na majority of water stored here, this can be seen as aton nga start and end point of your water cycle. So, diri siya gasugod, diri man ga-end ang aton nga water cycle. Doon mo na. Because if ever, man gid nga nagdiri siya na store sa aton nga underground, still it will go back to the concept, to the sa sini nga storage area. So, we are aware of that. So, okay, so another one is hambal naton kagina ang another component of a specific nga of this biogeochemical cycle so is your movement, and we have your again we have your evaporation, so which is happening because of our solar nga radiation. So gasaka ang aton nga water molecules so halin sa ocean, rivers, lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water kay gika-energized sila because of the solar radiation. Okay, so kakatabo lang man na because kinanglan naton sang sufficient energy para ang aton nga mga water molecules will be able to break free from the forces nga nagabind sa ila kag amo na ang main cause kung nga maka-evaporate sila pakadto sa aton nga atmosphere. Next, hamba ko kagina, we have your transpiration, kakatabo the process of water vapor being emitted by the leaves of the plants. So that is your transpiration. We have also your evapotranspiration. You can discuss natin kagina. So your combination of evaporation and transpiration happening. So and just to point out ang sininga part of your water cycle, we have also your sublimation process. So that is happening kung ang aton when your water moves directly from solid to gaseous part or gaseous state without ever entering the liquid state. So the process allows water in snow or glaciers to enter the atmosphere directly. So that means halin sa solid state diretso siya convert into its gaseous na form without undergoing the liquid na phase. So that is sublimation. So we have also medyo aware naman of the concept of condensation and your precipitation na process. So maghambal ta precipitation, aware na kamo na nga that is the water falls from the sky in numerous different form, whether it be rain. So the water go back to the surface in the form of rain, ice, hail, or snow. So, amo na ang mga possible nga way or forms nga makabalik ang tubig back into the surface. Okay, so if we consider sang kabiligan yung concept of your hydrologic cycle or hydrological cycle, it has actually an importance, especially in the field of engineering. So it has important influence, especially if you will be making different projects sa fields ng engineering. This includes, number one, agriculture. May agricultural engineering ka nga pwede i-consider. We have your forestry. This is environmental engineering. We have geography concerning your environmental engineering, and at the same time, your geo ng mga engineering and your civil engineering. We have also to consider the concept of hydrologic cycle in the field of economics, sociology, and political nga mga consideration. So, engineering application gid sang knowledge of hydrologic cycle. Hence, especially on the topics gid hydrology siya, are found in the design and operation of projects dealing with the number one. So, syempre, if you will be dealing with projects concerning water supply, irrigation, drainage, so kinahanglan nimo i-consider ang concept of water cycle. Another one, if you'll be making projects on water power and your flood control, so kinahanglan mo man i-consider ang hydrologic cycle. Also, if you will be performing projects involving navigations, coastal works, salinity control, and recreational uses of water, kinahanglan natin i-consider ang kabiligan nga concept of water cycle. So, as we can see, many processes are at work to give us the water nga kinahanglanon naton. Kay kabalo kita nga water is essential for us to live. So, and these processes are always at work. Okay, so, but before I end this discussion, let me just ask you a question. So, is evaporation taking place also in cold areas like Antarctica? First question, is evaporation also happening in the cold areas like Antarctica? Another question is, in some areas like Sahara Desert, so is there precipitation happening? Okay, just take a time to consider, tagpamangkuton ang kaugalingon kung para man sila ng inyong mga question. But just to give you an exact answer of what is happening in this situation, again, pastor ko. So, just because Antarctica is a frozen nga area, it doesn't mean that evaporation is not taking place. So, ice can turn directly to water vapor by the process called sublimation. So, and because your Sahara Desert is so dry, it doesn't mean that precipitation is not happening. It just happens that it evaporates before it makes it to the ground. So, may katabo dere nga precipitation, pero imbis tani nga madiretso siya or magtupa siya sa ground, gaka-evaporate naman siya because of the temperature. May kadagdag na tubig, pero gabalik naman siya. So, even before reaching the ground. And that is happening in the desert areas. So, I do hope this is now clear and the whole entire concept of your hydrologic or water cycle. This is it for now. Thank you. Stay safe. God bless.